before starting the talk, there were two things we forgot to mention last night. One is that between 3:30 and 4:30, this room here can be used for exercises or yoga, tai chi, whatever people like to do. There's also the exercise room in the sub-basement, but it's not large enough if everyone wants to work out. So even though some people may be sitting in here, that need not disturb those who wish to do exercises between 3:30 and 4:30. The other thing is that once during meeting, sitting time, I take a break, and either if there's walking going on here, this is what I do, walk with everyone. If sitting is going on, I come in here and stand quietly here and there with the people who are sitting. This is not to watch them or evaluate their sitting, whatever people may think I'm doing. I'm just there we're there with each other. And for me who is talking a lot with people, this is a time to be quietly with each other, non-verbally. Not as anyone special. If one doesn't think about oneself as anything or anyone, then one is no one special. No one. This is the first day of the March 91 7-day retreat at Springwater. And always on the first day, not only because new people are there, but because it is so important for all of us to look at it, talk about it, think about it. We talk about listening to a talk such as this, about authority, exerting or assigning authority. And our relationship with each other. As one person is sitting here with a microphone, giving the talk, and everyone else listening. There's listening going on here too. We're not separate in that. We talked briefly yesterday to be sure to find a comfortable position for listening to the talk, so the body may relax, maybe open up in this relaxed state of listening, not to have to battle with discomfort or pain. We didn't talk about that. Please, if you do feel you need to change your position, do so. But can it happen quietly, so we don't impact each other? Yesterday, the last thing I believe we questioned in the opening talk was whether there could be listening to all the movements within, listening to a talk as one listens to the rain, not judgmentally, not wanting to shut it out, not fighting it or resisting it, not agreeing with it, looking for support in it. just an open listening, which at the same time is also a looking within. Looking at what is being said, not just listening. Looking at it, maybe thought comes into thinking about it. I don't know, one has to see. Whether what is, to wonder whether what is being said is really so. It may be clear at the outset, yes, this is so, or may not be clear. So one has to look, not accept or follow or take the person's word for it because one assigns, for some reason or other, authority to her because of the place in which she's sitting. One may know some history about her or associate this with other people in authority or who speak in authoritarian ways. To be so careful, I have to be just as careful. It's not easy because in looking and talking, there's great intensity and energy, and that may communicate itself and be interpreted as wanting to convince people. The deep conditioning in human beings that force or might makes right. Just been through a horrendous war, and it's not ended, in which just by sheer power, destructive power, what were we trying to do? What were we trying to, what statement were we trying to make with that? That others will only understand force, power, clobber. So all of these gross and subtle associations when someone talks with intensity, attributing to that person the desire to convince or to persuade, talk someone into something, which is not, there's no intention to do this. The intensity is there, comes on its own. But it is for each one of us, including myself in talking, to look as the talking is going on or at any time, whether what is said is so. Does it hold up? And maybe just because one doesn't see it as so, not to reject it. And not to accept it, but to leave it open, free, for looking, for maybe discussing or dialoguing about it in a meeting, single or in group. Can we do that? And I'm not just thinking of intellectual debate, although we may start this way. That way may be all one has learned and knows how to do, to discuss or argue something intellectually. One position against another position. But what is said, not... There are things, opinions come in, but there's not a position represented here or defended or propagated. Just looking and discovering for oneself what is so in oneself and in each other, in our relationship. which is not a school of thought. You may think it is, you may argue. And I will look, when argument is brought, I will look at it. We'll look at it together. Freshly. I may not remember what I said unless a tape is being played back, and all of this is being taped. One can listen to it later. But we can look at this thing that moves one freshly because it's alive. Problems of loneliness or anger or fear, cut-offness, fragmentation or wholeness. We can look at it all, bring it up, examine it. How it operates in human beings, whom I represent, whatever fear or anger or yearning for wholeness, yearning for togetherness, whatever manifests in one human being, manifests in all of us. At one time or another, it may have been squelched early or promoted or laid down very early, very strongly, this more than that in this person or that person. But all of us manifest that stream of human consciousness, human history, human conditioning. By conditioning, I mean being programmed, educated, trained to think and act and know in certain ways. And to attach to that, to identify with it as me, mine, my ways. This is universally true of human beings, wherever one is, wherever we run into each other. One doesn't have to personally have been all over the world, but one just needs to listen to the news, the content of it, and the way it is being presented, to gain tremendous insight into the human mind and body and relationship. One person just recently asked, what do you mean by conditioning? You always use this word, and I sort of can't do anything with it. Maybe we can first say it negatively. Conditioning means not acting freely out of seeing clearly this moment. And this free action of seeing clearly and whatever may come from it, that's not conditioning. Conditioning, by that we mean to react, respond, behave, think in ways that have been determined in the past. Maybe a moment ago, a year ago, a lifetime, during this lifetime, or the lifetimes of all of our ancestors. Memory of what was is very strongly imprinted, programmed into human beings. What was, what one experienced, what one thought, what others around one thought, how they reacted, how parents, siblings reacted, our own reactions, all of it becomes memory, available or not available, but acting actively or passively in our present behavior. Not being free as we may think we are, or our ideology or philosophy, religion may say that we're free, that only human beings are free. It's the apex of evolution, this human being who is free as compared to the poor animals who are not free, who are bound by instinct. This is what we were taught. How we were taught to think about ourselves. And with these ideas about our freedom of action, of choice, of thinking, with this ideal and idea deeply implanted, not just in one human being, but in human beings, over centuries, maybe millennia. With this deeply implanted idea, it's very hard to see or to want to look at how conditioned we are, what our decisions and so-called free choices and free behavior really depends upon. What motivates it? What activates it? What motivates and activates our feelings? We're very protective of our feelings, that they are sort of have something true and gutsy to them. Talk about a gut feeling, but maybe with a dawning of a deeper attention when one may see the connection between a thought and this gut feeling. And the thought coming from the past, from what we have thought and others around us have thought in the past, and which has always elicited certain feelings. The past feelings also have a power to elicit present feelings, not just past thoughts. What we have felt impels our present feelings. So to the extent that in a week-long retreat that we're all participating in, to the extent that one can begin to question all of our assumptions and ideals and images about ourselves and human beings and each other, to that extent there may be a freeing of looking to what is actually going on within and in what our relationship is, even in a retreat where we don't communicate verbally. We're relating to each other non-verbally. Maybe with ideas, maybe the ideas are revealed and may therefore lose their power to rule our relationship. He is this or she is like that. She reminds me of such and such. Or here she or he is again. I know how they are. I haven't had a good relationship, or I've had difficulty to sit next to or get along with during work. The opposite being, I want to be near this person or work with that person. And the power of those remembrances. Not that it wasn't easy and nice to work with this person or hard to work with another person. Not doubting that, but the power of the remembrance to affect how we respond now, this moment. And the energy of when this is seen through and therefore loses its power, then there is an energy of looking and relating now freshly as a new person with a new person. Not a new personality, I don't mean that. Just coming from some place which has not to do with a personality, with all of our historical development and picking up this trait and that, and conditioning and education and bad experiences, good experience, as they have shaped our personality and character. I'm talking about a relating or a response coming not from that, but from a directness of being. Now, in the presence of rain and fog and squishy ground and toppled trees, and the rumbling of an airplane, if that's what it is. This here-ness, freshness, now-ness is there in spite of all of our personality traits. They don't need to hinder that or promote it. To see that directly, that's the shall we say, the miracle of this work, or the mystery, or do we have to need any word for it? So coming back to where we started, to beware not to make Toni into an authority figure, because others before her, like her, similar to her, or dissimilar to her, have been authority figures in one's life. Authority meaning believing them, following them. I think so much goes with it. One has to discover it for oneself. The whole authority syndrome. Some trepidations about coming into the meeting room has nothing to do with the person who's sitting there. It has to do with our past conditioning. You say, now wait a minute, it has to do with you because you speak with intensity and you have this and that. But where does all of that arise and ruminate and act? But in this mind of thinking and worrying and associating with the past. And please, I'm not saying don't have trepidations or don't feel fearful sensations in sitting maybe in the meeting line ready to come in. We're never saying don't have this or don't be like this, but feel it, see it, acknowledge it. Yeah, this is how it is right now, without conflict with it. Not blaming oneself or blaming the situation or blaming one's parents. None of us, unless some openness and insight is there, none of us know any better but to act from past conditioning. We're all in the same pot with that, in the same soup. So, can this week or this moment, this day be one of discovering? We started that way. It was so close to my heart to talk about this, not to blame or find fault, but to understand, to have insight, to see, find out, question. And as one finds out about oneself, not to make that now in something that becomes rigid, fixed, adding to the imagery about oneself. Now I know I'm like this, and now I know you're like that. But leave it all fluid, open, not attached to it. Because we're questioning this whole identity of me, in which we believe so firmly, so strongly and deeply. Desperately at times when it seems to fall apart. We're questioning it openly. This whole identity of me, what I am or should be, should become, have been, will be for all eternity, all of this stuff, which is not necessarily so much on the surface, but it's sort of the rock foundation of our thinking. What I am, what I treasure, what I value. That gives tremendous power to me, my values, my country. Pinning flags on the sweater, on the lapel. To be someone with that, an American, particularly a victorious American. This has done a tremendous thing to people throughout this country, or wherever Americans may be living. This is what was called a victory. A tremendous boost to the identity, to the me, with its value of a strong country, strong troops, strong technology, strong leaders. And therefore respected, so goes the idea throughout the world. And one can't just with a sleight of hand say this did not apply to me. One has to look very sensitively and deeply, attentively, how values that we may hold very unquestioned deeply constitute or make up the power of this feeling of me. May not be the value of the country, but that may have the opposite effect. I mean, one may hate being an American. That also makes up the identity of me, identified with some other ideal. And what we're questioning here, not with authority but openly, inviting each other to look, to participate in this inquiry, is, do we need any ideals for ourselves and each other? To live, to be alive with energy and goodwill toward each other. Goodwill sounds sort of moralistic, religiously moralistic. I mean, a feeling of affection and goodness, friendship. Do we need ideals for that and make these ideals part of the value of this meanness? This is how it usually works. We decide to become compassionate or meditate on compassion. And it may have results. I'm not saying it doesn't. But I'm wondering about whether there can be a coming together of human beings without any ideal, but full of warmth and love, energy, aliveness, because of the absence of ideals that shield us and protect us or channel us in certain directions with the remembrance of do's and don'ts, rewards and punishments, the reward of being good, associated with, in past times, maybe being patted, stroked, or given something for having been good. Today we may not need the direct physical stroke and pat anymore, or the direct reward. We can just think how good I am. And that's already a very rewarding thought, because it's associated with all of this other stuff which has taken place in the past. And the opposite being, of course, the horrendous thought, how bad I am, what I've done wrong. Associated way back with punishments we may have long forgotten, repressed, denied. Physical punishment or psychological punishment. But the thought, you're bad, that lingers. It can come up any time and just upset and make sick this whole organism. Because of feeling bad about oneself, feeling negative, down. This is the power of conditioning, of the way we think and see interwoven with all the values that we've ever held and all the society around us has held and is holding, which are arbitrary for time and place. You could say, well, isn't there any absolute value? Isn't goodness, love, isn't that an absolute value? In looking and wondering about it, all one can say is as long as it is a value, it is not love or goodness. It is still idea, conditioned idea, deeply conditioned, loftily conditioned with religious symbolism, and which has associated with its religious feelings, trembling, shivering, or ecstasy. Or fear. See, we are questioning this, whether we need any values or ideals or to be alive and related, at least for moments at a time, lovingly, not antagonistically, as you versus me, in which there's so quickly envy, jealousy, possessiveness. And as that comes up, not say I shouldn't be like that, I should be free of that. That's a new ideal, new value. But to look at it, to look at envy or possessiveness, coming out of loneliness, whatever, to look at the whole thing with the freedom that we have to look. We do have freedom to look. We don't have to believe in anything when we look. We can temporarily put the beliefs aside of what we are, soul, child of God, or whatever. You say, wait a minute, you make that sound so easy. It isn't easy, and I agree with that. It isn't easy, but it's simple. To freely look without ideals, without beliefs, which means one has to see that belief and ideal is indeed operating. If we don't see that, we take it for real. That's the trickiness of this whole process of thinking and imaging. Tremendously tricky and trappy. It masquerades for real, for truth. And we're questioning it. I'm not saying don't think, cut off thought. On the contrary, don't cut off anything. Look at it. And maybe in the looking at it, one can be done with it, seeing it at a glance. Or if it's not seen at a glance, follow that intimation of a fear, or of a feeling of I'm bad. Or so say, well, what is this all about? Let it reveal itself. Which can only happen when one is not threatening to slap it down with judgment and self-punishment. Am I talking too fast? Well, we'll keep going over all of this. Anytime anyone wishes to go over it, let me know. We'll start it freshly in the meeting room and then in the talk again. Because this is what talks are made up of these days or years, out of the questions that are brought up in meetings. Maybe a question regarding a talk, deepening it, and we'll go over it. And it's always new if you don't think it's old. The moment we think, oh, this is old stuff, then we're already not listening, and that's old, not listening. Sticking with one's ideas, fantasies, good and bad. So can one also let go of, oh, she's talked about this before, I've heard this so many times, I've been listening to talks for 10 years. because what is said may be fresh, maybe not what was said last time. And it is fresh when the listening is fresh, the looking is fresh. And whatever is heard and seen and felt is new. It's not yesterday's. It isn't. Am I trying to convince someone, or is it just the intensity of seeing? It's not all. This raindrop, this movement, this word coming out right now is not yesterday's, not last year's. It's just coming out now. Yeah. I hope people will not object if questions that they have brought up in a private meeting are brought up here. They are not brought up to point to the one who brought it up. We try to keep that as anonymous as possible, of course. Every once in a while it happens that someone says, I'm going to talk about something, but I don't want you to bring this up in a talk. And of course it is respected. At the same time, people have appreciated my reading more of the questions than can actually be brought up in a talk. I will try to do this again if I find the time to write questions down, to bring up all the questions which I've had so much response for that, people saying it is very helpful to hear that what moves in people's minds is also what moves in this mind, and not feeling so alienated from each other, which we tend to do, thinking it's only me who has this problem. Because one may turn it around and think it's only the other people who have these problems. Let me also say at this point that I am incapable of remembering verbatim what somebody said. And since very often many people or several people bring up the same thing in the course of a day, the question as it's written down, the different questions merges into one, so you may not recognize the words of your own if you remember it. This is not a sign that I have misunderstood you or not listened properly. That's why I'm explaining it. Because it is helpful for all of us if we feel understood. The fact is we are often or most of the time not understanding each other. Because the power of what we want to hear or what we are afraid of hearing or what we are adhering to distorts what we're hearing. That is also something to discover for oneself. How what we want to hear distorts or impedes the incoming message or information, or what we don't want to hear. So, to question what one hears. And with that, maybe already some opening takes place. Particularly if one allows whatever quick physical responses come up to what is being said, when one allows them to be felt, not repress them, not regret them, or cling to them. Just feel pain or anger. Feel fear or pain or anger manifesting it, if something is sad or sadness, and to give it all the space it needs to manifest. There is not only enough space in this room or in this building or on this piece of land, but in this entire universe. There's enough space for everything to manifest as it needs to manifest. There's no need to cram up anything. Hedge it in, wedge it in with resistance or habit. I mustn't feel this way. This goes so fast. But as fast as it goes, I mustn't feel this way. That can be heard, felt, that statement and its effect, and then it doesn't have to continue. We can feel that way. It's all right. We've never done it because the resistance was always so fast and unbeknownst, undiscovered. But here with so many people quietly working, listening, looking, questioning, it's much easier to hear such a quick resisting phrase. And it's not just a phrase, the whole body accompanies that phrase. You mustn't feel that way. It clamps, cramps, or whatever it does. And all of that has space to be observed, let be, unfold, and disappear, if it will. If it doesn't disappear, let it be there. See what everything will do when left alone, unresisted. Not knowing how it will all end. Can we be in that together? Let be what is there, what manifests, unresisted, not knowing how it will end. Whether it will end, we don't know. But here it is. Can resistance end? Repression. Controlling. That means resistance and controlling has to be felt, discovered, observed as it is manifesting. So, what is our relationship to each other in listening like this? Looking. Someone is talking, someone is the spokesperson for everyone. In communication with this mind and with the mind of human beings because they're revealed, opened up. So someone is the spokesperson who talks about all of that. Working hard to put it clearly, not always successful in that. Not infallible. As human, as conditioned as everyone else. Beset with character and personality as everyone else. So what is our relationship with each other? In looking, talking, even though just one person talks. Because we have meetings where everyone can talk in a meeting of 6, 5 people and myself. I'm not the spokesperson there. I just make comments or say things as everyone else has time for that. So what's our relationship? Is it student, teacher, or a follower, leader, authority, and whatever the opposite of that is? Or can we put all of that aside? It's not easy because it's ingrained, programmed into this organism and mind. So it has to be watched. And when it comes up, to see it, to see the image, see its effect, on the body, on the relationship, and question it, whether it has to continue in that way. Not try to cut it off or condemn it, but just to see, to intelligently observe what it does to our relationship. And maybe out of this intelligent observation or seeing, a new relationship will emerge that is not bound by these limits of image and past, and what I know you are, what I think you are, or I am, or they are. We will end here for today.